This is my Sony A7 IV, and all this stuff is my rig for it. And this camera by itself is great. It's a good camera. But there's some things here that make things easier, particularly when it comes to video shooting, but also photos as well. Like, I'll talk about that in a minute, but it just helps with the ergonomics sort of thing, you know? That's sort of the role of a camera rig, is to add more functionality than just what's here in the camera and the lens. So I'm going to go through all of the parts for my rig, and I'll show you a few different variations that I've come up with for different scenarios. So just to start, this is the Sony A7 IV with the 85mm 1.8. I also have the 20mm 1.8 right here, but here we have actually the new version of the small rig A7 IV / A7S III / A1 cage. And the main improvements I think that they made over the last variation is they added another sort of like locking point of contact basically for the camera, so it has even less like wobble within the cage. They added another cold shoe mount, and I think they adjusted the way that they do the A7 IV, A7S III, A1 conversion. Instead of having separate parts, it's just one part that's turned around. Already on here as well, I have a NATO rail on the top, which is relevant for the accessories that I'll talk about in a minute. And I already have this hand strap on there that I'm not going to bother taking off for the purpose of this. But this is just the small rig Black Mamba hand strap. I didn't really care that much what kind of hand strap, as long as it was this type. I didn't really care which one it was, and this one seemed pretty good, and it was in stock. Okay, the other parts that I have are this NATO rotating top handle. It's got a wooden bottom of the handle, I guess, and it has the metal top for all the mounting points. And it's a NATO rail attachment, hence the NATO rail on the top of the camera. And it actually rotates, so not only can it just be a top handle this way, you can also, if you loosen this knob in the middle, you can rotate it on that axis, so then it can either act as a sideways top handle or on whatever angle you really want it. Or how I use it is actually as another side handle, and I'll show you that soon. This is the left-hand rotating side handle. Also NATO rail, because the cage has a NATO rail built in on the side, so you don't need any other mounting hardware for that. And basically, it's a left-handed handle. On the top, it's got a cold shoe mount, some 1/4 and 3/8 inch threads, as well as loops for a strap. So you could also put a strap like this on this handle as well. And what's great about this is it's just a simple, like a single lever here, and you can rotate the whole thing, and it just sort of locks in place. It's pretty good. Now, since I got this, they did actually release a ambidextrous version of this, so you can use it as a right hand as well. You can use this one right-handed. It's just not nearly as comfortable because it is built to be a left-hand one. So that's sort of one downside to that. And the last thing I've got here from Small Rig is this monitor mount light. Now, I don't actually have a monitor yet, but what I do use if I need a monitor is this phone, and because of the Sony Imaging Edge app, you can just use a phone as a monitor. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. So I just have a cheap phone holder that I screw onto the monitor mount, and then the monitor mount will go in one of the cold shoes on the cage. And lastly, over here we have a couple of my mics that I would use with this system. This is the Rode Wireless Go 2, and this is the Rode Video Mic Go 2. Alright, let's start building. So while I'm building this, I'll quickly explain sort of what the role of a cage is, if you didn't already know. It's basically just to add mounting points to a camera for accessories, like I mentioned before, things that add functionality, such as monitors and handles and extra batteries and follow focuses and stuff like that. Basically, most cages will have a lot of 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch threaded holes that you can basically just screw anything into. There's also common systems like the NATO system, which is just a rail system that allows you to relatively easily just slide on accessories. And by the way, this little tool that I'm using is just one that comes with the cage. It literally just magnets into the bottom of there, and it's not going to fall out. It's slotted in there, but it's super easy to get to, and it's actually very convenient. Not even just for putting the cage and stuff on, but like screwing tripod plates like this on the bottom. It just makes it so much easier to just have a flathead screwdriver always on the camera, and I don't have to get out an Allen key or a screwdriver. That being said, if I do have handles on, these handles also have Allen keys. They just sort of slot inside them, hidden. Both of them have that, so that's also pretty handy. Okay, so this is basically how I would have the camera if I was to do any photography. If I was just going to take this around, take photos, I would just have the cage on with the hand strap. A lot of people would probably take a cage off if they were going to go do photography, because generally you don't really need that many accessories if you're just taking photos. However, one of the reasons why I actually wanted a hand strap was for photos, because the first time I really took this camera out and walked around with it, I noticed, because it was, you know, a little bit bigger and heavier than my G85 that I'm filming on right now, it did kind of wear a little bit on my hands. Like, I could feel that I was carrying it, and it wasn't an issue, but the hand strap would have made it a bit easier. And I've noticed that as well. When I do have the hand strap, it's just easier. I can let go of the camera and it's fine. I don't need to worry about holding onto it the whole time. I'm not scared I'm going to drop it. It just adds that little bit extra not only security, but also a little bit of support too. It, like, you can get it a little bit steadier, but just because there's more contact on your hand. So that's my photo setup. Now, I have multiple setups that I have come up with and that I have used. So I'll show you a couple of setups that I have for shooting horizontally, and then I'll show you a couple that I have to shoot vertically. Now, first of all, the most simple one would just be the top handle, and then flip the screen out, and then you've got a pretty stable one. I can just put a hand underneath to help stabilize. And then this would be if I was filming a bit lower and I didn't have to hold it up, you know, level with my face sort of thing. Because if I was going to film like this, I would actually put the other handle on, which I'll show you in a sec. But this is good for, you know, B-roll if I'm following something, if I want to get low to the ground and still be able to see really well, and I don't have to be on the ground. This is great for that. And then same can be said for this setup. If I don't need a top handle, if I'm going to be filming like this, like I was the other day when I was helping my brother film some stuff, this setup works reasonably well to just be standing there. If I know I'm going to be two-handing it and I can't really get low, if it's more like a sort of a documentary style, I guess. And this would be sort of if I wanted to do a bit of both. So if I wanted to do a little bit of two-handed, you know, holding it like this, or if I needed to get low, or if I needed to be a bit more steady, I could probably hold it like this. And not only does this allow more ways to hold the camera, it also allows more ways to mount things. For example, the cold shoe on the top of the handle, perfect for the monitor mount, which I can then put my monitor on. And this would be sort of like the full setup once we get a mic on. Depending on how I plan on using it, I could either put the mic in the cold shoe here, because there's a bunch of cold shoes that I can use. So there's the one on this handle, I could put that there. There is an angled one right here, which I do like using. However, with this handle on the side, if it's as far up as it'll go, like it is now, not going to be great. But if I want to put that mic on there, I can just mount it at the bottom of the rail, and then the mic just sort of fits there. Downside to this one is it doesn't sit flat on a desk, but, you know, whatever. So this would be my full sort of filmmaking setup, I guess, if you will. And of course, I could either put this mic on, or I could put the wireless mic. Now, it could go in really any spot, but this is sort of the best spot because the plug for the mic is right next to this. So just loop the cable through that little hole there, and it's fine. Could mount it on this handle. Could mount it on the back of this handle. There's actually a cold shoe mount right here. Or there's the one over here, but then I'll have cables sort of going all over the place. So this is sort of the best option for mounting mics with this sort of build. And with this monitor mount as well, I could tilt it up and down. For example, if I was holding it up in front of me, I can be looking at it right there. Or if it's below and I'm holding it by this handle, I can tilt it down, and that works just as well. I could also just turn the whole thing around if I needed to for whatever reason. But that's pretty much it for the horizontal setups. Now, I've actually used this sort of setup less than the vertical setups just because the majority of the stuff I do outside of these videos is actually just vertical content because it's for social media. I would rather shoot more this sort of stuff, but that's just not how it goes these days. So let's turn this into a vertical shooting rig. Okay, so the simplest way that I can do it is to use the native rail on the side for the top handle. And then this is pretty much this setup. This would be for if I was doing that sort of B-roll style where I didn't need to be holding it up in front of me. Downside to this is the handle kind of gets in the way of the screen if I want to see the screen with it slightly flipped up like that. However, I can remedy that by using a monitor, and I can as well change how this is mounted and have it mounted vertically. I could do something like this, or I could use this mounting hole, mount that onto the monitor mount, and then just have it running basically directly above the handle, and that works just as well. So there's sort of a few ways that I could set this up, but that's the most simple setup. I have used this before, but I have a better setup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take the top handle off, and I'm actually going to run it this way with the screen at the top so I can fold it out and just use the screen. And I'm actually going to add a native rail to the bottom. So I did get this extra native rail just because I knew I was getting 2 handles. And to make sure, I just wanted to have an extra one. And I can use one of the Allen keys that are just accessible in the handles. So with now a native rail on the top and the bottom, if I put the left hand handle on the bottom, and then the top handle on the right, which is the top. Now, this is not really ideal, but because this is a rotating handle, if I loosen this, turn it, and now I basically just have 2 side handles. And this actually works pretty well. I can flip the screen up so I can see it at whatever angle. I could flip it down if I'm holding it up in front of me, or I could flip it up if I'm looking down at it. I find sort of somewhere in between is usually where I would have it. But this is pretty much a great setup for filming vertical video like this. Now, there's a couple things we can change as well, of course. We can, of course, add a mic, and on the angled cold shoe mount, it doesn't get in the way of anything, so that works completely fine. And then, of course, we can add the monitor. Could add it onto the top of the left handle here, and that would be fine. I could put it way over on the side of the cold shoe mount on the other handle, but then that'll be sort of too far off to the side, and that's just sort of not great. So this one would work. I would obviously just turn it so it's vertical and fitting with the format of the video, like so. So now we have a vertical monitor and the LCD screen from the camera itself. Now, in this sort of scenario, I feel like I don't really need the monitor because I can so easily see the screen. However, once I do get an actual monitor, I think it'd be worth it just because this phone screen isn't that much better than the camera LCD. So any like decent 5-inch monitor would probably be significantly better than either of these, so it would be worth it in that scenario, but right now this isn't really necessary. And of course I could always use the wireless mic if that's what's needed for the shoot. And this is a much more inconspicuous sort of setup, I guess. Not that it's that inconspicuous, it's still kind of conspicuous. And of course this is always an option as well for filming video. I can always just horizontally film this way or vertically film this way, and it's fine. It's just the handles and stuff do make things a little bit easier for the most part. Now, there are a couple of issues that I've noticed with what I have. One of the biggest ones is when I have the side handle on the left side, it kind of gets in the way of the screen. I can't turn it all the way and it still be, you know, horizontal. And then as well, I can't grab the handle if the screen's there, so I kind of have to do a bit of a false grip on it, and I can't use my thumb, which is fine, but it's just a little bit not ideal. It'd probably be easier if the handle could somehow be a little bit further forward or even further down as well. I can have it further down, like I mentioned before, and then I can also tilt it slightly to get it a bit more out of the way, so that helps, but it's not a huge deal. It's just something that's not great. And like I mentioned before, with the top handle on the vertical setup like this, it also kind of blocks the screen, so that's when it would be more beneficial to have a monitor compared to some of the other ones where I can easily see the screen. And speaking of monitors, one of the downsides to how I configured the setup is with a monitor on the top, or even with a mic on top. I could put this mic on the top of the top handle. In either of those scenarios, it's just a very tall setup. Like, it just doesn't need to be that tall. So what I would probably do differently, knowing how this sort of worked out, is I would probably get a monitor mount with not a cold shoe mount, but an RE locating pin mount with a 3/8 inch thread, and then I would mount it onto the front of the top handle instead of onto the cold shoe on the top. So then it would end up being more like this, where the monitor is a bit out in front and I can still tilt it and everything like that. It just isn't on top of the top handle. And then if I was to completely get a whole different setup instead of all this, one thing I would consider is maybe getting the whole setup from Folcam instead of Small Rig, largely because their quick lock mounting system, I can't remember what it's called, but it seems better than the Nader rail system, and you can literally just slide anything on, and you don't have to tighten anything like with these. You have to tighten the thing after you put it on the rail, and then to get it off, you have to, you know, hold down the pin on the side and then slide it off until you get it to the pin, then keep sliding. But with the Folcam system, I'm pretty sure you just slide it on, and it clicks into place, and it's just there. And then to get it off, you press down on the front or the side of it, or you press down somewhere, and it just works. So that would probably be one thing that if I was to redo all of this from the start, I would look more into other brands. And now let's talk about how I would improve this rig and how I want to improve it, because I'm not going to get rid of any of these parts anytime soon. So it's really only going to be adding to it. Now, a lot of these things likely won't be very soon, because the next thing I want to get is probably more batteries, at least one more battery for this. But also I want to get more lenses first before I really start building out any of this stuff, unless it makes more sense to get that stuff at the time. But time will tell with that. But in either case, what I do want to do to this rig is I want to get an actual monitor, because this 5-year-old phone is not ideal. It has no monitor features. The app is okay, but I have to turn off airplane mode on the camera, which will drain the battery more. So I do notice that the battery just does not last nearly as long when I'm connected to a monitor. So if I can just connect to something via HDMI, then I don't have to worry about the whole airplane mode thing. And monitors have monitor specific features to help with focus and exposure and all that sort of stuff. So an actual monitor will be good. I want to get a V-mount battery, and then obviously a way to mount the V-mount battery, so probably some sort of quick release base plate that I could just slide the cage into, because as I didn't mention before, the bottom of this cage is just an Arca Swiss compatible rail. I guess it's a rail. So if I could just slide this in and lock it down into a base plate, have rods on that base plate, so then I could mount a V-mount mounting plate, and then mount a V-mount battery to that, so then I could have much more power than a single FZ100 battery in this. That'd be good as well. So that'd probably be the second thing. And then it would also mean I can easily beef up the rig or not, depending on the needs of whatever I'm doing. If I need more power, if I don't need more power, if I just need it to be heavier, if I need it to mount to certain things, the base plate might be easier than just this, or vice versa. So it would all depend. And sort of one other thing, that if at some point in the future I get into really using manual focus more, for example, if I got like cinema lenses or something like that, or even just tried to use manual focus more on these lenses, then some sort of follow focus system that I could probably put on one of the hands, so I can then manual focus a bit better. Because yeah, manual focusing, particularly on this lens, is not great, and I talked about that in the video about this. And then with this lens, it's just very short focus throw. But that's another thing that's sort of in the back of my mind, but it's not really like I'm planning on doing. But that is my Sony A7IV camera rig. All the parts from Small Rig, except for the phone and the mic. If you want to watch a video about this 85mm lens and 85mm lens in general, click this video right here. And then this video underneath that, that'll be a video about the A7IV. Thank you for watching. Okay, bye.